had a lot of excitement, but maybe not a lot of motivation, because the hardest thing to do is to start from scratch with nothing.
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the VRNation Station, podcast for short-term rental industry that doesn't really follow the norms. We're here for a good time. We're here to educate, and we're here to support property managers in their efforts. And honestly, I'm pretty stoked about today's episode because I have Casey Hansen with me. Casey is she's a unique individual because her path to get into to property management is not necessarily a foreign path from a lot of you, but ideally, I think that her story is strong because it really shares some of the decision making early in the process to get up and running. So, Casey, welcome to the podcast, and thank you so much for your time this morning.
Thanks, Jamie.
So, why don't we start off? Maybe you can just give us an overview of Red One and how long you've been in business, how many properties you have, and maybe some of the other fun facts about your company.
Yeah, so we are running for nearly 4 years now. We manage properties exclusively in the Dallas-Fort Worth area in Texas. I always say we are just local because it's really important to me that we have boots on the ground presence at our properties. We like to ensure a really good guest experience, and if I can't physically go there, then I'm maybe not, managing it all that well. But we manage 40 properties in DFW. We've got, a full staff here of digital marketing, cleaning managers, maintenance folks, lots of contractors. And so we really love to take care of our properties here.
Excellent. So tell me a little bit about your origin story. We were going back and forth before the podcast started. And, you made told me a good story about how you got in. And I think it's interesting. So maybe just share a little bit with the folks, like, how did you come about? Like, what even gave you the idea to start this?
I was not in this space at all. Like, my background, I was a retail buyer, and then I got into construction buying. And so I really had like the analytics and the, kind of property side behind me. But I was actually at a tech company and was fired during COVID, 2 weeks before Christmas. Not because of COVID, but just because of my personality. I don't think that I had the corporate type personality, and really didn't ever understand why I didn't fit in. And then I just realized, okay, this was a big blow to my ego, but it was the kick that I needed to start a business of my own. So I didn't know what type of business I wanted to start. I, had a lot of excitement, but maybe not a lot of motivation, because the hardest thing to do is to start from scratch with nothing. And, having lost my job, had a lot of money, excitement, but so I needed maybe not a lot of motivation, because the hardest thing to do is to start from scratch and, with nothing. Just kind of build it with that grassroots approach. So I met a guy on a dating app, and he was doing Airbnbs, and he said, hey, I, am pretty busy. I'm staging these houses that I'm setting up. If you want to hang out with me, you got to come with me. So I ended up going with him and staging houses, and realized that, okay, I'm pretty good at this. So I had other clients hire me to stage Airbnbs and design them, put them together, and quickly realized that these folks don't have anybody to manage these properties. So I just kind of naturally fell into it. And, I would never have, said as a little girl, hey, I'm going to be a property manager one day. But, here I am. And it turns out my background was very well suited in that, I have the analytics from being a buyer. And then, this business is quite technical, which I wouldn't have thought stepping into it. But, getting all the softwares to behave and act the way you want them to is you kind of have to get into the weeds with it. But little did I know, my background served me well, and then I was off to the races.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's interesting. Brent Blom was another person that was on my podcast, and he was an interesting guy because he's how many properties are you at right now?
40.
40, and you're not small.
Yeah, 40
So it's
exactly.
funny. Yeah, it's funny because it's like Brent, for example, he's on our board now. Great guy, absolutely great guy, and he was explaining his backstory, right? And they were traveling. He and his wife were traveling, and they started off. I think they had like two or three, is how it kind of went. Well, he was in corporate world as well, but I mean, he was like almost like a C-level higher up, and he had all this time, and he just realized like it's so much more fun to do this thing, and it's so much more scalable, and I don't need to split my time across so much. And like you were saying with the technology is really helpful. In fact, my last guest, Akshay Bajaj, he's an interesting character because he talks about property management service and systems and how they combine. And he basically laid out that there's a lot of manual aspects to property management that can be automated with new AI features and things like that. But it comes back to my mind is like the differentiation, right? And I had said this, and everybody like grits their teeth and winces when I say it, but it's like property management is not that complex of an industry, right? Like there are certain things you have to do, and you got to do well, right? You got to be good cleaning, you got to have good quality, you got to take care of properties, you have to be good at maintenance, you got to be good at relationship management, because some homeowners, let's just say, are more difficult than others. So, you've got to be solid, right? Guests, you got to care about your product. You have to care about your product. You have to care about what you're putting out there for customers. And, but when you get down to it, you can really narrow that focus and get some energy. And the technology, I think, that's out there today is enabling people beyond anything that existed previously. Where I'm curious on your side of the house, like from a technology perspective, when's enough enough? How do you know, like, hey, I'm not just chasing the shiny thing every time I turn around?
Man, that's a hard line to toe all the time. As a business owner, I want to scale with integrity. And a lot of times when people scale, they lose that integrity of the business, which in the short-term rental space is a personal touch. It's, calling guests up if they're confused about how the door works. Like you can have AI talking to people all day long, but people get annoyed by it. I can tell the properties that have only AI answering messages because it shows up in their reviews. So I think that we do have to toe the line between personal touch and just automating everything. Like one thing that people do a lot is they hook all their pricing up to price labs or something, some kind of dynamic pricing or smart pricing. I actually turn all of that off, and I'm probably the only one that I know that does that. But
Yeah,
it's
that's new.
because I like to control the pricing. Nobody cares about profitability. I care about profitability. I know whenever I can push the limits and get a higher rate because I know my properties, I know the area. And, if you're relying, say, on like smart pricing with Airbnb, they care about making some money. They don't care about making maybe, profitable money for you. They just want some money. So they like drop rates whenever I wouldn't. And like, I found that if you are trying to press the easy button with pricing and you put that stuff on, I feel like you're losing. For me, for my properties. No shame to anybody else who doesn't. But that's one of the things that I won't give up. And because of that, I feel like I engage the algorithm a lot more. I see a lot more bookings and I see a lot more profitable bookings. But I think like everybody has to make that distinction of where they want to toe the line between like, hey, I'm willing to, not have high touch on this particular task, and here's where I want to have high touch over here. But that's just a couple
Right.
examples of what works for me.
Well, you hit the nail on the head. And shout outs to my buddy Ben and Ivy from VRBO and Expedia. And I spend lots of time with them because they're trying to talk me off the ledge when I see things that aren't working our way. And I think you really uncovered something, Casey. So my question is, like, when you're making these changes, are you going into the dashboards and making the changes, or are you making the changes within your?
Yeah, so I do it in the PMS,
Yeah.
so it'll flow out.
Yeah. So the interesting part is that in discussion, so I, years and years and years of being a business analyst and a software developer, so I know how it works. So I know the questions asked to pick away the layers of the onion.
Yeah,
And the interesting part is that VRBO, Expedia, Airbnb, Booking.com, they change their algorithms almost on a daily basis. And maybe it's not that extreme, but it's close. And it's one of those where they're trying to they're trying to favor people who work within their dashboards and who do manual revenue management. That really, it's one of those where a lot of property managers, and I think they're feeling their way through it because they're trying to figure out their profitability as well, especially when you have Airbnb making large scale moves, right? Like turning around all of a sudden saying, oh, now you're going to pay me 15% versus the 2%. And you'll have to figure out how to get all the money out of the guest. Well, I mean, it wasn't that bland, but they gave direction. But the point is, like, if you didn't follow suit, you got whacked hard. Like you really got hit hard. And being able to manually roll with the flexibility and the changes that come with those it pays dividends. There's 100% guarantee
yeah.
on that.
And it's hard because these platforms do change so often. And so like sometimes we'll see spikes and I have owners, oh, why are we seeing spikes? And I'm like, man, I couldn't tell you. And I'm like, I could make something up, which I feel like a lot of people do.
Yes.
But unless I have data driven, accurate, things to say, I'm not going to throw it out there. But it's the same way whenever things dip. Hey, why did these dip? Man, I can take a real educated guess. But somebody tinkered with the algorithm because they had a meeting and had a thought, and now our properties dropped off.
Right.
It's hard.
Right. Yeah, no, and I hear you. And it's I run into that too. We're in a fairly competitive market up in Idaho. Believe it or not, there's not a lot of property managers, so the competition is there's not a lot of anything there, right? We don't have thousands of properties as our supply, and we get the new kids on the block all the time that come in and make pretty bold statements. They're we outsell our competition by 40%. I saw some of that literature go out. I'm going, oh, brother, good luck. Like, whoever you sell on that, you got them for a year. It's going to cost you extra. You might have made some money, but man, are you going to drown your ops team? It's crazy. They're going to be so upset. But it is what it is. And I think that there's control.
Well, that's a lesson that I learned early on with this business. So I would tell my potential customers, clients, investors, that, hey, I can help you get more bookings. And then I learned quickly, oh, I need to step that back quite a bit because I have some control. I don't have all control. Nope. And so I always fashion it like this. Hey, if I'm a realtor and you hand me a $250,000 house and say, go sell it for $1 million. And if you don't, you're a bad realtor. Oh, well, okay. Well, it's not $1 million house, right? And so at the end of the day, I can be the best realtor in the world, but I can't make it something that it's not. Right. So for some reason, for that profession, people understand that. But whenever I started framing my sales meetings as, hey, I'm going to give you the best opportunity that this property has. When I started framing it like that, then, a year down the line, I wasn't getting quite the churn that I got whenever I first started.
Right. Yeah, no, and you're 100% correct. It is funny. I think people have, and by the way, you are the only other person that says realtor. I say realtor, everybody corrects me. It's realtor. Like,
okay. What's the difference?
So you and I, how we pronounce realtor is like there's an A between the L, the A, and the T. Yeah. It's REALTOR, so it's realtor.
Yeah.
People are always correcting me on it. I just thought it was so funny that I saw that you did that because I was like, oh my God, I have a sister in arms here because somebody else says realtor just like me. But you're right. It's funny because I think there's a lot of perception, especially around how realty is sold. And I think that when properties sell, I see a lot of correlation with behaviors between people who are selling their properties and people who are renting their properties. And a lot of times the behavior is, what do you mean that's all I can get from my house? What do you mean that's all you're going to put on the market? What do you mean you're going to drop my price again? This is a $1.5 million trailer. Like, this is the best trailer ever. And it's like, no, bro, it's a trailer. Like, you can't, they'll set their own price. And I see a lot of property managers fall into the same trap, is when pricing gets set, the homeowner comes in and says, well, I've been doing Airbnbs forever, and I know that my property is worth this amount of money. Now, mind you, I have a homeowner who listens to my podcast, and she's now gritting her teeth, but she's actually the one that was right. So she'd been in it there's a difference between somebody who just started doing, short-term rental management and somebody who's been doing it for 20 years. If you've been doing it for 20 years, then I step back and go, teach me, because if you've been in it 20 years, you know what you're talking about. And so I apply her principles into pricing strategies specifically with her properties, because she's learned it. Like, why would I try and change that? That'd be stupid, right? All I can do is make it to a broader audience with my different marketing techniques and campaigns, where she didn't have the capacity to do that type of marketing. So now it's like I just create more of a supply for it to come in, or demand, I should say, not supply. Anyway, long story short, I get it, and I think it's a good idea. I don't know how you manage the time. It's a lot of effort to put in. How often do you go in and change your prices then?
Every day.
Every day. So you have it on a ticker, it's constantly coming back, and got it. Okay.
Like,
well, that's interesting.
And it's not even me who does pricing anymore, but my folks that I have work on my pricing, they maybe spend 30 minutes a day on it. We only do it Monday through Friday. We don't change them on weekends. We just kind of let it ride. But it's maybe not even 30 minutes. I mean, if you just touch it a little bit every single day, I want to show these platforms that I'm an active host. That, like, I'm looking at this and I'm touching things. And then, granted, that is through a PMS, which you make a good point of, like, I know that they want us to be on their platforms, but, that's not the only thing we're doing. We're also touching the listings. We're updating the copy. We're updating photos, like updating listing titles. So a constant movement of those listings is what I found is key. Have you ever looked at your audit log in, let's say, Airbnb?
I've seen it. I don't monitor it.
Well, what I started doing very early on is I would look at my audit log of what my actions were. And I would do this like once a month, right? So I look at my action, like, okay, I changed an amenity, or like I updated a photo, or I changed prices or whatever. And I would pull up my insights tab at the same time. And I would pull my audit log and my insights tab and say, okay, well, I had an action here, and then I saw a spike in views on my property. And really, that's the most I can hope for, is views. Like, sometimes you don't get the, what's the word I'm trying to say? Where conversion. Sometimes you don't get the conversion because the property is not right. The reviews are not right, whatever. Right.
Right.
But, to say that, hey, I updated a photo and now I had a spike in views. Okay. Well, that's really good information. Now I know what's kind of driving.
Oh, I see what you're saying. So you're actually monitoring your actions and then seeing the outcomes. So you built yourself a baseline of views and conversions off of your changes. That's a really interesting way of going about it. I didn't really think like that. That's so how do you track your benchmark? Like, do you look at property A and it says, hey, I've got 6,000 impressions over the year? Or do you look at it like, hey, this last week I've got 10 and I made this change, and now next week I've got 12. Oh, that's a positive change. And then you just highlight that. See, I know I've never taken it that deep. That's interesting.
Yeah. Well, whenever I first started, I was scared. I was really scared. I'd promised, I'd sold these investors and property owners on what I could do for them. And I was scared shitless to fail. And so once I was able to kind of track my actions and correlate that to views, it was almost like I was creating case studies for myself and proving my value as I went along. Because it's not just about getting the client; it's maintaining the client too.
Right.
And whenever I can show, hey, here's what I'm doing, that really helped or qualify like the money that I was making.
And that makes sense. I mean, it's funny, right? Because I was going to talk about just pivoting back to your unique value proposition, and you've already gone that route, right? Which is funny, because when I look at what you bring to the table, again, folks, for anybody listening, please like, subscribe, follow, ask questions, be a part of the podcast, because people like Casey are how you're going to improve your processes, right? The 18,000 vendor emails that land in your inbox are not going to teach you anything, right? They are selling you a product. Talking with people who are successful, who have gone and figured it out, like Casey, is what makes the difference. So please and that's the other thing too. I'm also going to pitch VRNation as an association, folks. This is why you join VRNation. This is why this example, Casey, is example. This is exactly why you would join VRNation. Because if you don't join VRNation, you're not going to end up crossing paths with someone like Casey. And she will educate you on something as simple as just putting in the time and energy around pricing that could make or break your business. Like, it makes that much of a difference. It doesn't cost that much, and they're great folks. So please join VRNation. You will not regret it. All right, back to what we were talking about, Casey. Your unique value proposition. I think it's really interesting. Because I always say this, and it's funny the reaction I get when I say like I'm like that random guy just spouting off facts at some bar stool, right? But it's like when I start talking about value props for a property manager, there are uniquenesses within each and every function. I think I probably have it on my board behind me. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's 6 major functions in property management. Okay. And what you're talking about right now is one of them, pricing. Absolutely mission critical, which I think is interesting because a lot of people really fall back on wheelhouses. They fall back on the RevMax. They fall back on their software to solve the riddle. But by taking it that one step further, that is a really incredible, unique value proposition of saying, hey, I've gone into the point where I look at the audit logs and the changes and listing management and how I can increase conversions through my marketplaces. So kudos to you. That's really that's a huge step forward. A lot of people. You're the only person I've ever talked to that does that. So I'm sure there are others who do.
Doing it, but I've told people this, I've told people this before, and it's just one of those things. Like, I think when you're first starting a business, you have a lot of fear, and that fear is good. Of like, how am I going to afford groceries, or how am I going to pay my bills next month? Like, right. That fear drove me, and it was extremely helpful for being creative, and being creativity in business is the difference between success and failure.
Absolutely.
It just is. Like, growing up, I was very artistic. I was in music. I was a singer in college. Like, I have a lot of creativity. Now, I love running a business. I think growing a business is so fun. Whatever the business is, it's just a widget, whether it's a product or a service. But I love running a business. So I took that background, that artistic background, and laid it over my business knowledge. And now, I can come up with creative ideas. Like, whenever I first started my business, I had no clients. I decided to host a free masterclass of how to run all things Airbnb. And what I unknowingly did at the time was give myself a platform of an hour and a half to sell myself to people. Because at the end of the class, they were like, well, this is all really interesting. There's a lot more to this than I thought. Can you just do it for me? To which the answer is, hell yeah, I can.
Yeah. No, that's terrific. Right. I mean, that's really unique, Casey, that you said that, because like you do a free masterclass. So this is where my head goes, right? Because everything that you said, even in the audit log, were all thoughts that went through my mind, the actions I have not taken. You are the action in the thoughts that I'm like, man, that would be a really good idea to do that. But you're the one that's like, no. I'm going to go do this and I'm going to make it happen. And I think that's the difference, right? When we talk about people who can, they can be successful, and people who are maybe muddling, that is the key. What you just said there is the key: creativity and action. If you are creative and you take action, your business will thrive one way or the other. And I love it. I think it's absolutely spot on. It's awesome. That's cool. I love it.
Execution is key, and execution is the hardest part. I always say, like, I'm not the smartest person in this business. I'm not. I don't even think I'm the smartest person in most rooms. I just keep showing up. And that's really what it takes. Just keep showing up. And it's like going to the gym. Some days when you go to the gym, you're tired, you're hungover, you don't want to be there. Well, that's not a day you're building muscle, but that may be a day that you're maintaining muscle. Maybe you get to stay at baseline. And that is what I keep doing with this business, whether it's, showing up to a networking meeting at the end of a workday because I don't really want to go, but I went to a networking meeting and, one time I met a handyman that introduced me to a realtor that introduced me to my biggest client I ever had. And it was
Right.
all after a day where I did not want to go and I was in a pissy mood and I was like, great, another realtor. I'm like, God, I've just met so many of them. And,
Right.
but that was, that relationship I still have to this day. But sometimes it's just showing up, continuing to show up and continuing to execute, which is very difficult. Whenever I started this business, I was a sleeper. I love to sleep. I would love to sleep till noon every day. Well, guess what? You can't really run a
No,
business sleeping to noon every
doesn't
day.
work that way.
It doesn't. I always say, like, I'm just secretly a lazy person that, like, I'm trying to find, like, the best way to be lazy. And, getting up earlier was something that was really difficult for me at first, but I stayed committed to it. And now I get up at a reasonable time with the rest of the world.
That's so
But
funny.
we
It's
all have our
interesting.
little.
Yeah, we do. It's interesting, right? Because before we started the podcast, we talked a little bit about our age differences, right? And I don't know why I always leave that. It's always the beard, right? This is just my fall foliage, right? So I lose it in January and get my hair cut and all that fun stuff. Go back to the
Okay.
real world of actually like assimilating with other people. But
I
the
shaved my
point
beard
is,
just for this, actually.
well, I appreciate that. You didn't have to, right? We could have
I
had
couldn't
we
help.
could have been in the same club.
Yeah.
But the funny part is, right? So I have, I've got kids that are graduating. I have one that's out of college. I have one that's
Wow.
graduating college, and I have another one that's like a sophomore in college, right?
Wow.
And as I share with them some of these experiences, and they do listen to the podcast as well, so they tell me. But the point is, yeah, right, whether they do or not, right? But the point is more along the lines of, what you had just said about showing up makes a huge difference, right? And it's one of those where not everybody can get out of bed every day. And I would hazard to say when you were working in corporate world, I'm assuming that's where you were like, man, I can sleep all day, right? Because
Yeah.
there's not a lot to get you out of bed when you're working for other people. I mean, you have your personal integrity, right? But when all of a sudden it's like, you pull yourself up by your bootstraps and life is sitting in your seat. You're not an accessory to somebody else's model. It's, life is really, your decisions are going to impact, are you going to eat next week or not? It makes a difference. I get up at 5 o'clock every morning, regardless,
Yeah.
sometimes earlier. And for no other reason than, I wake up thinking like, there's something more I gotta drive towards. Right. So I'm always up and I'm always moving. And it just boils down to like what you had said, you've got to have that drive, and you have to have that concern, and it's fear. There's a bit of fear in there, right? Because fear and joy are the same trigger within your body. And it's like you turn it that way, how you perceive what you take that fear and how you convert it into action makes a big difference. So I think that what you stated is very, very powerful. Let me pivot you a little bit because I'm really interested. We've talked about some of your back office stuff that essentially, when we start thinking of, like working on your pricing or working on listing management. Tell me about your guest experience. Like, what do you do that sets Red One above other folks as far as the guest experience is concerned with your properties?
Yeah. This is an unpopular opinion, but I'm very colloquial with guests. I'm very casual. I keep it very, like, I use slang. I don't keep it very, like, buttoned up and customer servicey because I don't think that's what people want. I think that if they wanted that, they would go to hotels. But I say, if there's a girl coming in, I'm like, oh, hey, girl, you should check out what's going on down the street. There's whatever activity going on and you should check it out. If you have your dog, you could go for a walk, whatever. But I keep it very casual. You know, Whenever that happens, I feel like it accomplishes a few things. One, it gives the guests the experience of an Airbnb where they want kind of more local, personalized kind of touch, right?
Yep.
But also, whenever it comes to dealing with problems, hey, the heat went out, the water's turned off, dishwasher doesn't work. All of a sudden, you aren't some corporatized customer service person that doesn't care. You're the person that said, hey, girl, when they checked in. So all
Right.
of a sudden, you're a real person. So there's humanity on the other side of it. And so whenever I throw the humanity in there, uh, you know, like the agitation, it just kind of lowers because you're just a real human being on the other side of things.
Right.
So, and in addition to that, I always say for myself or anybody on my team, if we can't solve a guest issue within 2 messages, we pick up the phone and call them. Because I'm not going to sit there and go tit for tat, messaging back and forth. Well, the remote was there whenever you checked in.
Right.
I'm just going to call them and be like, hey, did it maybe get stuck in a drawer? Oh, okay, well, great. Now you figured it out. So I think that the customer experience is, always a high priority for everybody. But whenever you get AI into the mix and get real customer servicey, I think that human touch component is lost. It's just what people are looking for.
Right. And that's a valid point. I tell this story uh, to anybody that wants to listen long enough. But essentially, so I'm in Wisconsin. If you can't tell, right? I carry the code. But a good friend of mine, he's got a few short-term rentals up north of where I live, and we had talked about property management services and things like that. And to be honest, it wasn't a good fit, right? I looked at the properties, and they were built in the '60s as like cabins, and they haven't really been updated since then. And I'm going, man, I was like, there were no walls for bedrooms. It was a curtain type thing. Right. And I'm going,
Yeah.
I'm sure the right kind of people will be okay with this, but I don't know if those are the kind of people that I really want to market to. Like it's, that's a different crowd. Right. And so he goes, well, here, I'll send you my links on Airbnb because he's only doing Airbnb, and 5-star, 40 reviews, 5 stars. And I'm just like, what? Like how? Like how?
Yeah.
I have people that sign into our cabins in Idaho, and if they perceive a breadcrumb, it's 1 star. If they perceive, a toilet maybe not have been flushed, it's a 1 star review. And then I need a refund and then a chargeback. I'm like, how are you guys avoiding all this? And what you just said is the difference. Well, his son Corey, by the way, his son Corey's a great kid. He's in his 30s now, but he's a great kid, and he's always been a kid to me because I was friends with his dad, right? So, but it's funny because Corey's just a very outgoing, fun guy. He owns 2 businesses himself. He bartends at a local distillery for fun, right? Because he just likes to sit there and have conversations with people. He's just a very people person. Corey is the reason it's a 5-star. It has nothing to do with the property. And he goes, yeah, we don't ever really get any damage. We don't have any people that are, We have really zero trouble with it. Neighbors aren't complaining. And I'm just like, that's amazing, right? But what it boils down to is, Corey, it's that personal touch. Absolutely the personal touch. Now, is AI fit in somewhere? I think so. But I
Sure.
think it's more like automated stuff, like when's checkout time? When's this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've had properties like that. Like one of my first three properties that I got my first three properties all in the same week. Um, and one of the first three that I got was an airplane hangar. And there was a house, above where the airplanes were stored. And the guy that owned it was a pilot. He was a veteran. And he also officed out of the hangar in a separate portion of it. So whenever guests would arrive, he loved to meet them. He loved to talk to them about the planes. And he actually offered like a complimentary, uh, you know, flight up above Fort Worth. Just a short little tourist flight is what they call it. But uh, you know, he was the reason why that house, like everything was dusty and dirty because it was an airplane hangar, right?
Right.
Like it wasn't perfect, but he really made the difference because he loved people and everybody loved him. So I do love to hear stories like that. And I think as a owner of a business where I want to grow, so hard to maintain that integrity as you grow because you have to maintain that personal touch at a large scale, which we all struggle with.
It's interesting. I have a very unique question for you, and I know you've never been asked this, but I'm going to ask it anyway. The
Okay.
hanger story, Corey's story, right? The one thing that I do find correlation between those is a unique demographic that they sell to, right? Not a lot of people off the street are renting a property with a hangar. They're just not gonna. You will get pilots. That is a close knit community. My dad was a pilot for many, many years. He would tell me stories of, they would fly cross country, land in some private airport in the middle of a cornfield in Iowa, and they would have all sorts of discussion points that, essentially they would sit there and chat all day about, and it's just some old timer who had an airstrip there, and they would go back and it would be a destination, right? Just because of the human connection, right?
Yeah.
The people that come back up to visit Corey, they come back. They consistently come back and stay with them because of that experience
Yeah.
originally. So those are the kind of things that I think are truly unique. And I'm just curious, like, do you see that, and do you cater your marketing to specific demographics, or are you still kind of anybody that shows is in?
It's kind of a weird question, but I think of it like just a funnel, right? Airbnb, VRBO, Booking.com. That's going to be where the majority of your revenue is going to come from. And then it gets more property specific from there.
Right.
So, one of the special things that I do as a property manager that I don't really see people doing is I partner with production companies. So, one, production companies, need a place for their cast and crew if they're coming in to, film a TV show or movie. I'm going to pause for a second
Go ahead.
because my dog is snoring and it's so fucking loud. I'm going to show you this. I'm going to turn you around. Look at this one. Do you
Oh my
see
God,
her?
that is so funny.
This one. She's got this stuff. I need you to wake up. Okay. Boop. All right.
Now she's pissed. That is funny.
I don't know if you can hear her snoring, but
No, I can't pick it up on the background noise because the echo cancellation's on, but it's hilarious.
Okay, but she's just so loud. Oh my God.
No, it's hilarious. I'm between, so I have a dog. He's just like that. He's like 8. His name's Nino, and he's a snorer, and he talks. He's a little rat terrier, so he's a talker.
Yeah.
So whenever he does anything, he grunts and growls and huffs and snorts, and he's like this old man running around. And my daughter, who's in college, has a cat that she left with us. And this cat is like kitten stage, and she's a terror. And she literally just jumps on him constantly, and they're just fighting. And I've been actually in meetings where the two of them, like, he'll be sleeping on his chair because he's got his little throne, and she'll literally rock in the room, see him sleeping, and then just take a jump on him, and then jump off, like just like a springboard, and then he'll just be biting and snarling, and people are like, what the hell's going on in your office? So like, just everyday stuff, man. Everyday stuff.
Yeah.
That's how it works. That's so funny. Well, here, we'll jump back on track because we're at 40 minutes, and I promised I wouldn't keep you here all day. But let's talk a little bit about so you've been in, how long have you been in business for? What's your year count now?
3, nearly 4 years.
4 years.
Almost 4 years, yeah.
Okay. So, Cabino's been in business that's the property management company that I work with. They've been in business since 2008, right? And
wow.
Yeah, it's interesting because we're sitting right around 70 properties. And we can't break that barrier. For some reason, it just seems like either between churn or just something funky happening, some market economy thing. Being in the business for 4 years, having gained as many properties as you have, which is a huge, like, undertaking. I mean, a lot of people don't get what 40 properties means. That's a lot. And when I think of it, I'm going, where do you see the future of vacation rentals? Whether it's in your area specific or just in general, what are your thoughts on it? I mean, clearly you have ideas.
So when I started this business, there was one major company in DFW that was doing business in the short-term rental space. They had 225 properties. They were a mix of long-term and short-term rentals. They were horrible. Probably like one of like the worst companies. Like they just had screwed over so many property owners. Well, so it was easy to take their business whenever I first started, but then they were sold off, restructured, and now I think that they have like 70 to 80 short-term rentals, and they're really my biggest competitor in this space or in this geographical area. So in my mind, if I can knock them down a peg and take their market share, I don't know if we'll be able to push past 70 or 80 properties, but I think, we're going to see where this business takes us. And it's more important for me to take care of my current clients versus gain new clients. That's always my rule of thumb. If I have a sales lead come in or I need to make a phone call to my current client, I always choose my current client over the new client. Gotcha. It's not just about growing. It's about growing with integrity, which is so important. I mean, I know I keep like harping on that, but it is so important for me with this business because our brand and our reputation means more to me than the money does. People mean more to me than even the business does. So the people aspect of this business is really what I like to keep my hands around.
Yeah, no, and that makes a lot of sense. And to be honest, it's refreshing to hear because in the days of mergers and acquisitions and, rapid growth promises, it is an interesting thing. And it's funny because I see, like I said, previously we were talking and I said, we get some, new players in our market and we're pretty competitive in our market. And it's interesting to see the attack actions that they take to try to gain market share. Some of them are successful. Some of them have done pretty well by themselves. I think we're number 2 in our main market. We're number 1 across the eastern part of the state. But it's like when you look at people that are coming in, there's some significant growth coming from some of these younger folks and when I mean young, I mean more just newer to the industry that are coming in. And I don't know if it's a technology advantage or what it looks like, but it's definitely something for people to keep their mind towards, especially if they're growing. Keeping your eyes on what's important. Who got you there, taking care of your team, taking care of your brand, your company, your owners that have been with you. That's mission critical. One question about your homeowners, just communication. Like, how often do you communicate with your homeowners?
That's a good question. I would say communication is one of my key differentiators as a company. So we communicate in the style that the owners like to communicate in, whether email, text, phone call. We ask them how they like to communicate and how often. I know some people, they want to hear from me after every single little issue just because they want to know, while others, they just don't want to know. And so I don't have a regular check-in point with people, but most of my owners, we check in pretty often. I would say weekly.
Really? Weekly? Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. What do you talk about? I mean, because I don't talk to my homeowners weekly.
Yeah.
There's a lot of don't wake
Well,
the baby
whether
to
it's
hear it
like a
cry, but
specific, yeah, whether it's a specific issue, sometimes they'll call me and just be like, at the top of the December calendar for DFW, December every single year, we have a short booking lead time every year. Every year on December 1st, everybody freaks out about the calendar because nothing is booked. Oh my gosh,
right.
it's supposed to be Christmas. It's supposed to be busy. What the hell is
Yeah.
going on? So I have to field those phone calls. And really, I get ahead of them whenever I'm talking to people. But I'm like, listen, booking lead time is quite a bit shorter for this area for December. I
Right.
don't know why. I really don't. But, then I see it's funny. I was talking to my marketing manager this week, and I told her, it's nice to see all of these bookings rolling in. It's December 23rd. Like, we've had fully stocked calendar for all of our properties. And I'm like, it's nice to not be proven as a liar. I was like, because I've been telling people on the phone,
Right.
don't worry, they'll come in. And I'm like, it's nice that I didn't lie to everybody.
Right. And that's the thing, right? Because it goes
Yeah.
back to promising, things like how much money they're going to make, promising what the rates are going to look like, promising what the pricing is. And you just sit there and you're like, man, I could look like a genius, or I could look like a serious, have some serious integrity issues, because it's not in our control. 99% of it. I mean, trust me, I spend so much time with marketing, between, PPC and social media, and working with our distribution lists, and building, marketing flyers out, and balancing with the revenue manager to say, hey, who's really needing to be highlighted, so that I can see if I can get some direct bookings built into their properties. It's a lot. I mean, it's just a lot to try and keep through. And I think where you said is probably one of your strongest value points. I think that's a really key thing we have to keep in mind, because I don't do enough of that. I think is probably one of the big fail points, is that I don't do enough conversation with my homeowners, for sure. Absolutely, for sure. Well, I'll tell you what, I'll ask one last question and I'll let you go, because I know you got stuff. It's almost Christmas time here. Advice for anybody getting into the business, advice for new investors, advice for new property managers. We got quite a few people that have maybe 2 or 3 are thinking of growing. What kind of advice would you give to those folks?
Unlikely advice is to not have too much money. When you have money, you lose your scrappiness and you lose your creativity. My father always says, Casey, do you have a problem or do you have an expense? And a problem or an expense is a problem that you can throw money at and solve. A problem is a problem that you can't solve, right? Well, whenever you don't have a lot of money, you find creative ways to solve those problems that don't involve throwing money at it. And it makes you a lot better at your job. And it makes a lot leaner business model. Like my business model is super, super lean. And because of that, I can undercut my competitors on price and still make good money for myself and for my property owners. So I always say, like, be scrappy, be creative. Sometimes if, people feel like they can't start because they don't have a lot of upfront money, but that's actually going to serve you in the end. It certainly served me.
That's excellent advice, Casey. Thanks so much. Hey, I really appreciate you joining the podcast today. It's been a wonderful time meeting you, a wonderful time talking with you. I look forward to meeting you in person. I'm assuming you're going to be in Denver in April, would be my guess, if you're coming to the conference. Excellent. Well, I'll make sure that we spend some time there. But again, thank you very much. And, happy holidays to you and everyone. And best of luck to you guys for the rest of the season.
Thank you, Jamie. Appreciate it.
Welcome y'all to the VRNation Station. We're diving deep into vacation rental sensations. From management tips to the latest creation, join us each week for some sparkle and conversation. VRNation Station, tune in and feel the thrill.